Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the office. It's just been a few minutes here. I needed to go get some more water and just take a break, and hopefully you got that chance as well. So let's pick up where we left off. We are still in the Roman era, and I'm talking to you about Quintilian. Now, Quintilian, as I said, knew that he could not write another book like Cicero did. He could never measure up to his hero. He was the one who called Cicero the greatest speaker, greatest rhetorician of all time. And what's fascinating about that is we still don't know exactly how Quintilian knew about Cicero. I mean, we assume he learned it somewhere. Perhaps there was a family link somewhere. We're not really completely sure. So, does it matter? Probably not. But what could Quintilian do in an era of the Roman Empire when the power was centralized? There was no need for rhetoric for the most part, but he felt that it was important to bring it back. Well, Cicero wrote the textbook for public speaking. Quintilian thought maybe I could get away with writing basically a teacher's handbook for that. So Quintilian said, here's what I'm going to do. Mr. Emperor, you want to keep your power, right? And you want your children to be successful in keeping their power, right? So let me teach your children how to maintain that power through the art of rhetoric. Brilliant. Now, in doing that, he, of course, was reintroducing the concepts that Cicero had. And of course, he was, I don't know how to put this other than had the people around him been smart enough, they would have figured out that he also was doing what Cicero was doing. And they may have feared his power as well. He admits he's not the best speaker. He can never be as good as Cicero. And everything that he did borrowed from Cicero because he wanted to reignite it and re-enlighten people. And that made sense. He did, however, make a couple of small suggestions in his handbook for teachers, if you will. And I don't think that these are necessarily only for people who teach rhetoric or only for people who wanted to explain Cicero. I think that they're actually pretty darn important. Let's start with the first big difference. Quintilian talks about the ethics of an individual. He defines the perfect speaker or the best speaker as, and this is the direct quote, I'm sorry, it's been translated probably 5,000 times. It is, do I want to say it like the original way? Maybe I do. So Quintilian decided to define the best speaker as a good man speaking well. Now, of course, these days I would say a good human speaking well. But back in those days, that's how it went. So a good human speaking well. Well, okay, speak well. Good job. No, I mean, obviously, the speaking well part comes from Cicero. It's the good person part that people struggled with. And for a very specific reason that we really don't learn until, I think it's about 1600, if I recall. We'll talk about it when we get there. So Quintilian said that when a speaker speaks, they cannot just practice the 5 canons. They have to be a good person practicing those 5 canons. Now, to me, this sort of goes back to what Aristotle said about goodwill. But if you think about it this way, goodwill can be faked, maybe. Goodwill can be seen or interpreted from not so goodwill. Maybe that's what Quintilian really had a problem with. He really had a problem with using rhetoric to keep power and suppress others. So the way he worded it is, you have to be a good person who speaks well in order to be a rhetorician. He did not say, the emperor is a horrible human being, so he's not practicing rhetoric. He didn't say, there are far better people out there than our emperor and somebody should speak up. He didn't say any of that, but he did say that it must be a good person speaking well. There are going to be massive problems with this come another millennium or so. And we'll definitely talk about that and why that is so impacted by Quintilian. Now, another thing Quintilian gives us that I think is absolutely fascinating is he tells us about different kinds of stories that we might tell, different narratives. I believe he gives us 3. And I'm doing this from memory, and I'm hoping it's in your book. And I didn't check if it was, but it's good for you to know this anyway. So this is Quintilian vis-a-vis Dudash. Okay, let's talk about that. 3 types of narratives. You have a historical narrative, you have a humorous narrative, and you have a realistic narrative. Okay, what are those? The historical narrative is a story based in a real event that is used to demonstrate some parallel in your current speech. So sometimes I feel like, it's important to tell you guys a story that happened 30, 40 years ago in order for you to understand the point we're trying to make. That would be an historical narrative, not hard. The realistic narrative is a narrative that could be based in something real. Probably isn't, but it potentially could happen or could have happened. So for example, if I tell you, when I was coming down the stairs today, I just slid on my butt and went all the way down. That's a very believable story. I've never done it, but it's very believable, isn't it? It's a story that has some root in a realistic possibility. My daughter does it all the time. Me, I just walk down the stairs. I don't know why she can't just walk down the stairs. Imagine being 12 years old and just always just falling, and she falls on the 3rd step. I don't understand it. We're going to have to work with her on that. And it's just our stairs, by the way, not any stairs. But it's very realistic that I might have fallen down the stairs on my way to my office today. It's not true, but very realistic. So that's the realistic narrative. Finally, the humorous narrative, I believe it's called, shocker of shocks. It's intended to elicit some sort of emotional response from you in order to demonstrate your point. I have an example for this too, because of course I do. And it just happened this past weekend. I'm so excited about it. So I love animals. I love furry animals. I love reptiles. I don't like frogs. I don't like turtles that have to stay in the water because then I can't play with them. But a tortoise is cool. But I love all animals. My niece just got a bunny. Her sister has 2 guinea pigs. They have dogs. Me, I'm not allowed to have anything furry. Why? Because my husband is allergic to feathers, fur, and hair. Literally. Even a hypoallergenic dog that has more hair than fur can't do it. My heart really took a beating when I decided to marry him because I had to get rid of my Angora sweaters and my feather pillow and my cat, whose name was Quintilian, and that is a true story. He left us not too long ago, actually. One of our other professors was kind enough to take him on after I had to get rid of him because I married my husband. So that's a very sad part of the story, but here's a very cool part of the story. Just this past weekend, a friend of mine had told me that she had started volunteering at WOW, which is, I believe it's called Watching Over Whiskers. And it's a cat rescue. And she said, you know, I got a, they thought at the time that the kitten had to be a couple days old. Turned out these people found this kitten on the side of the road and turned him in to WOW, which is great. No mother, no siblings to be found, still had the umbilical cord attached. Like this little guy, girl, whatever he is, we don't know yet. He or she had not, I mean, we think that he or she was born within the 12 hours before he was or she was brought in. I say he or she because we've been calling him a he, but it turns out that cats you don't know what their sex is for a couple weeks. Who knew? Kind of like leopard geckos. You don't know until they're 5 months old whether they're, male or female. So anyway, she said to me, I said, oh, that's so sweet. I would love to go in and see him at some point. She goes, well, why don't you come over? And I was like, what? She goes, yeah, he's at my house. He's going to be here for, probably 6 weeks. I went over, this thing weighs less than my leopard gecko. It is tiny. I have never seen a creature this small. So cute. No eyes open, obviously. Just yesterday, which would have been about his 6th day. No. 5th day of life. His ears popped up in a very cute Yoda-like fashion. And she let me hold him and feed him, and you have to feed him with a syringe. And some of you were like, we know all this, Dr. Dudash, we're raised in farmland. But I as much farm experience as I've had, not that much. Kittens are one thing. I've helped kittens be born before, but I never they just immediately were on their mother. I never really picked them up or held them, obviously, for any reason. So this little guy had to be fed with a little tiny syringe. He has to eat every 2 hours. And in 3 days, he gained 0.1 ounces, which is awesome. And it looks like he's going to thrive, or she is going to thrive. I love that story because I get to think about my little kitten, Valentino. I'm very lucky. I get to volunteer at a lot of different places, and my friends volunteer at a lot of different places. So I get to play with dogs and cats a lot, and that makes me happy. But little Valentino, whose name is now Valentine, since they don't know whether it's a girl or a boy, has my heart. But I think we're going to be, adopting him out, and we have to accept that. And that is sad, isn't it? But it's happy in another way. So, go out and adopt a kitten. No, I'm just kidding. That is a real story. It is historically based, but it's also meant to sort of trip your feels a little bit. Now, if you hate cats, that's probably not going to work for you. But small furry animals, referencing the idea of nursing an animal to health or from being born, you might have experience with. And perhaps it brings up a memory for you, hopefully a good one. Perhaps it somehow pulls on the pathos strings just a little bit. So humorous stories and historical stories and realistic stories are useful to the rhetorician. And I don't think a lot of people focus on that. But in speech writing, in speaking, we use a lot of stories. I mean, I do, obviously. Some people might call those tangents. Others call them stories that help aid in education. And honestly, I've had full classrooms. Obviously, when I was in the classroom with them, I miss being in the classroom with you guys. When I would be in the classroom and I would tell a story, there'd be some people who are like, oh, and other people are like, oh, that's fascinating. And you're trying to reach more than just the people who are saying, that's fascinating. And you're trying to reach more than just the people going, oh, dear God, here she goes again. Right? So it's very important to relate those stories to the lesson you're trying to teach. So eliciting that emotion can be done through a narrative. That's what I was trying to tell you there, and as well as demonstrate the 3 different narratives. Quintilian gives us those. They're very cool in my mind. Of course, he talks about the 5 canons. He has his little tweaks to the 5 canons, but nothing major. He puts them in the same order. He references Aristotle and Cicero, but he writes it in such a way that the ruling emperor and the people around him would not feel threatened, because he's saying, I'm doing this to help you maintain power. All right. So hopefully you've read Cicero and Quintilian. They're very well organized. They're very clear in what they say. And I just realized, I'm thinking to myself, was it Quintilian that came up with the 3 narratives, or was that Cicero? I think it was Quintilian. I feel pretty good about that. It's not always easy to remember all these things when you're 47 years old. And I could have gone and checked it, but didn't I say it with such confidence, right? Unbelievable. All right, so the next piece that you all had, in here that you had, I told you to skim it because it was not something that I wanted to get too deep into, but I wanted you to know about its existence, and it becomes important soon. Longinus wrote a piece. Well, they think it was Longinus. They don't know. But Longinus wrote a piece called On the Sublime. And probably the first thing most of us need to know is, what the heck do we mean when we say sublime? It's not the rock band. Very good rock band, by the way. It's not the, it's not subliminal messaging. It's something more than just pleasure. Okay. So what is it? Well, a lot of definitions can say it different ways. Here's one I'm going to read to you. The sublime, from the Latin sublimis, is the quality of greatness, whether physical, moral, intellectual, metaphysical, aesthetic, spiritual, or artistic. The term refers to a greatness beyond all possibility of calculation, measurement, or imitation. That's a high standard, don't you think? So the sublime is something that is so incredible, so great, so awesome, that you can try to explain it, you could try to describe it, but it's beyond imitation. It's beyond being able to be measured. And so a lot of people throw the word sublime around a lot. Oh, that's so sublime. Is it really? Is it just not pleasant? Maybe because sublime really implies that it's so amazing that it almost transports you into a different, sort of sense of being. I don't mean that in some sort of weird yoga way. I mean that in the sense that there are times, I believe there are times when we experience something and it's so incredible that we can't even express, because we're not even on the same plane anymore. We've kind of lifted out of ourselves and are just, I think the other term I would use is blown away by what we're experiencing, and we have no way to relate it to something else. Okay. Why did he write this piece? On the Sublime was written to talk about how sublime a work, a writing specifically, could be. But more importantly, he's defining for us aesthetics. Aesthetics. A-E-S-T-H-E-S-T-I-C. Aesthetic. And then pluralize it with an S. Aesthetic. What is an aesthetic? It's a mode or a way of something being pretty. In terms of writing, eloquent. And so eloquent and so beautiful that the rest of it probably doesn't matter very much, or that it can be enjoyed simply for what it is. Um, I gotta tell you, I've actually um, can probably name like 3 times in my life I've felt that. Um, felt sublime, but the aesthetic is easy for me. I'd be like, that is aesthetically pleasing. Not that hard to imagine. I have a picture. I keep looking up to the right. I've got a picture of the city of Pittsburgh, which is obviously my hometown, but also one of my favorite cities. And it's a very unique drawing. It's black uh, background with white sketches, and I love it. It's aesthetically pleasing to me. My husband's like, why is that thing up there? He doesn't understand. I didn't do the sketch. It's a professional sketch. How can you not like it? He doesn't like it. My husband loves to play Dungeons and Dragons, and I did too when I was in college. And I'm like, dude, I outgrew that. But for him, it's fun. And he asks me to paint his little miniature statues and everything. And I said, why am I doing this? He said, because it adds to the aesthetic. And I was like, okay. They're not really useful for anything other than making something look good or feel good. That's what the aesthetic is. Some people will define an aesthetic as a like entire grouping of an idea of ideas. For example, some people might say, I have the hobo chic aesthetic in my house, meaning that what? Well, that they have, did I say hobo? That's terrible. I apologize. I meant boho chic. Wow. It's been a rough day. So boho chic in my house, the aesthetic of that. What does that look like? Well, there's a lot of handmade works. There might be pottery, some macrame, hand knitted quilts or blankets. There's a lot of warmth in it, a lot of subdued colors, and but it's chic. So it's done in a way that looks formal and pretty, and that's an entire aesthetic. Um, I've also heard about the modern aesthetic. I mean, again, another word that gets thrown around a lot, but at least that word is able to be left up to interpretation and can be described. I love the aesthetic of city art. Any art that represents a city, I love that. It gives my room an aesthetic that I really, really love. That makes sense. You can identify with that. To say, "Oh, this color of purple in my hair is just sublime." Well, that's a little overstating it, don't you think? That's really overstating it. So, really what we get from Longinus's work is less about the sublime, although a lot of people focus on that. It's actually more about understanding how aesthetics work and having an appreciation for the aesthetic of a speech or the aesthetic of a written work. Particularly, he was talking about literary works. A lot of times this is used in literary criticism. For us, it's just kind of nice. I'm not sure if you've had this experience yet, but you might. There have been people I have seen give speeches who I could just listen to forever. No, Joel Osteen is not one of them. I particularly remember a professor I had in my PhD program named Jeffrey Williams at Mizzou. He's no longer there. But whenever he speaks, there's like this, I'm not really sure how to explain it, but he has one of those voices that just comforts you. He could be talking about anything, and he says it in this cadence and in this tone that just, it doesn't put me to sleep. It just makes me feel comfortable, sort of get a warm, fuzzy feeling. I don't know if you've ever had that from a speaker in your life, but if you have, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And some people have said, well, what is it I love most about my partner? Their voice. My husband would tell you that was the first thing he liked about me, which is disturbing because I hate my voice, but who doesn't, right? But sometimes I can watch a speech and just not just be inspired, not even need to be persuaded of anything, but just feel good watching it. And that's what Longinus is really talking about. All right, everybody, I have covered the classical Roman period, including some of the in-between eras. We now know that Quintilian lived during the time of the Roman Empire, and that Cicero lived during the time of the Roman Republic. We know that power is related to rhetoric in that I say dispersed, but really the best word is to say decentralized. Power requires rhetoric, and centralized power has no need for it at all whatsoever. If you've ever seen a government that moved from more democratic or more distributed power to more centralized power, the first thing they do is shut down the practice of rhetoric, of speaking. You may know that already. That is actually the first step in taking control of a country or of a situation. It's just to shut everybody down from being able to speak. So I hope this helps a little bit. I know you've been reading, so you've got a lot more information in your book. I am going to be providing you with an exam. Don't you love how I said that? Like it's a gift. I'm going to be giving you a test. It is online. You will have a week to do it. However, I do not put time limits on my exams, but I do say you can only take it once. So you can open it up, start it, walk away for several hours, come back and get to it. That's no problem. But if you shut down the program or your computer, it's going to go away and you're not going to be allowed to try again. So what I say is make sure that you have a half hour or an hour of time to really sit down and take the exam, or have a block of time where you can start it and get back to it and go back and forth if you need to. Third, you can use, obviously, all the books and lectures and whatever you want. I will warn you against one thing. If I ask for a definition of something and you Google it and put it on the test, it may be wrong. The reason for that is because we are talking about definitions within the context of a very specific thing, subject area. And so if I say to you that Aristotle's definition of rhetoric is the art or skill of knowing in any particular instance all the means of persuasion, that's the definition, not something you picked up when you did a Google search. Okay? I'm just saying, I don't care where it comes from. It could come from not Aristotle himself, obviously, but it could come from another university professor. I don't care. It's going to be marked wrong if it's different from having those three components that I just outlined. So I know that sounds harsh, but it shouldn't, because all the answers you need are either in your book or in a lecture. And I'm going to tell you this. I'm very big on trends. Very big on trends. Okay. So I'm not going to be asking you on page 263 in your book, what does it say? I'm not going to be asking you for little minuscule pieces of information. I don't care if you know when Aristotle was born or not. I'm concerned with the big overarching ideas that we've gone through. So if I've talked about it and you've read about it, it's most likely going to be on the test. And if you are taking the test and you've got your book in front of you and that's, pretty much what you're doing, you will be able to find the answers. And since I don't put a time limit on the exams, that should be helpful to you. All right. Fourth, the format of the exam is short answer or multiple choice. That's that. What I do is make sure that you pay attention to the number of points that are available to you. When you're answering a question, if I think it needs a longer answer, I will put more space for you. If I think it's a shorter answer, I may only put like one line for you. So that can kind of help tell you what we're looking for, or what I'm looking for in the test. Hopefully that is helpful to you. Let's see, is there anything else you need to know about the exam? I think that's probably it. What will the exam cover? Well, the exam is actually going to cover the introduction to this course, the ancient Greeks, and the Romans. That's it. Okay. It's important that we have these basic ideas down because these are the foundational points of the study of rhetoric. So, any questions or comments, please email me. If I don't get back to you, please text me or send me a message or pop onto the discussion board under the Dear Professor discussion and pop me a question. Whatever way you want to do it. I've been having a lot of email trouble lately. So it's been going to my spam folder. I think I have a handle on it, but you never know. So I hope you enjoy your week. I hope these 2 videos help you out a little bit as you were reading or after you read or before you read. And I will be in touch soon.